Ramar mato isunay habuwabu matong butano matong itinggo. Sinamane biasa sinamane Rama mato abano Rama mato abano Arroyo nidra mato yura akira Aki ira buai Sinabi mai ani sinabi mai Ako sinabi mai Mato iso wanuri Raibu yukata Raibu yukata No sinabi Atong koshi oración habuai Kano bibuai Kano bibuai
Ну коли оце так, позавчора,
Холодно.
3 снаряди ударило,
3 неділі в такій холодині ми жили.
всі ми дуже
Без
пережили
води,
і
без
вирішили
світла.
евакуюватися.
без тепла. Чаю нема де загріти. На дворі палили огонь, а все одно боялися, тому що кругом танки стоять. Кругом стріляють. Я прожила 95 років, а я такого не пережила. І голод пережила у 33-му, і в 41-му році прожила війну. Ну, такого страховиська, такого я ще не бачила. У мене у Москві живе 2 сестри, їхні дітки. Чоловікові 2 сестри там жили і померли. Ми жили як браття. Для чого зробити оцю війну? Для чого? Кому нужна ця війна? Ми Україна. Ми хочемо жити самостійно. І ми 30 років живемо вже самостійно. Ну дай же нам пожити самостійно. Ми 70 років жили у такій кабалі, де нам казали, що Бога нема. І трощили церкви при мені, при моїй пам'яті. Я була ще вже в такому возрасті. Горіли церкви. Засилали віруючих людей, які робили добро, які шанували людей, які не хотіли, щоб було зла. Ми 70 років так прожили. А зараз, Боженько, ми хочемо жити самостійно, дай нам. Чого ти лізеш на чужу територію, кому тобі нужна Чи тобі мало в Росії тієї території, що в тебе є, обробляти її треба. І то українці туди їздили подивати ціну. Я пам'ятаю, як їздили наша молодь в Росію подивати їм цілину. А зараз вони нас вбивають, а зараз вони стріляють наших дітей. Господи, Боженько, я молю і прошу тебе. Я вірю, Боженько, що ти держиш все під контролем. І я вірю, Боже, що ти допоможеш. Що ти допоможеш, Боженько, знайдеш права для Путіна. Знайдеш, мій дорогой Господь, і покажеш йому путь, він йде широкою дорогою в ад, і нехай іде, дорогой Господь. Я вірю, що ти це ждеш, дорогой Господь, но ти поможи йому поранше, дорогой, поможи, щоб він дійшов туди, куди він йде зараз. Господи, а наших людей, дорогой Господь, наших українців, наших добрих, порядних людей, трудолюбивих, ніхто не остановить за нашу Україну. Слава нашій Україні! Слава!
Почнемо із ситуації у російській армії, там говорить найбільша російських
From the dire gloom in Kyiv to the glaring opulence of the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin toasting Russian officers with sparkling wine. Appearing in a good mood, he boasted of his bombing campaign on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, arguing that it was a retaliation against Kyiv's aggression. He also compared himself to Peter the Great, not something new for a man drunk on imperial history, but Moscow may now feel it can sustain the war in the months ahead.
Now we have the new Mr. Putin. I looked at the pictures of Mr. Putin, trying to look for a trace of humanity. I should, within a few weeks, have known better, because you know what happened. They had the terrible tragedy of the submarine going down straight to the floor. Whether there was an explosion inside or not, we don't know.
Polish ambassador to France, Jan-Emmerich Roszkowski. Either Ukraine will defend its independence today, or we will be forced to enter into this conflict.
Donc, soit aujourd'hui l'Ukraine va défendre sa indépendance, sinon, en tout état de cause, nous serons obligés de rentrer dans ce conflit parce que nos valeurs principaux qui était le fondement de notre civilisation, de notre culture, de notre sera en danger fondamental. Donc on n'a pas de choix.
They don't value human life as much as we do. Margaret Thatcher speaking about Putin after Kursk submarine tragedy in 2000. She calls Putin leader of the USSR in the video, probably seeing his ambitions and dreams clearly. What do you think of the video?
Now we have the new Mr. Putin. I looked at the pictures of Mr. Putin, trying to look for a trace of humanity. I should, within a few weeks, have known better, because you know what happened. They had the terrible tragedy of the submarine going down straight to the floor. Whether there was an explosion inside or not, we don't know. But it was very interesting what happened. If ever there's a calamity in the West, the whole of the armed forces will go and take everything there immediately. The politicians immediately will get together and say, what help do we want? They can have anything we can give. If we haven't got the help, we'll get it from someone else. There would be anxiety, because what mattered was not the submarine, but the lives of those in. And the interesting thing was that the new leader of the Soviet Union didn't act quickly. This was very soon the comment. He didn't try to mobilize everyone else. We didn't know whether we could help, but we were all ready to go and help, and sent some of the small submarines that we had just for such an occasion. But that, my friends, was very, very revealing indeed. They still do not value human life in the same way that we do. And so, all the help got there, I'm afraid, really rather late. And I'm very relieved in one way that Mr. Putin got so much criticism for what he should have done, but didn't. And that again shows that the Soviet Union and the peoples of the Soviet Union are very much aware of what could be done. A great deal more could be done than is being done at the moment. Now we have the new Mr. Putin. I looked at the pictures of Mr. Putin, trying to look for a trace of humanity. I should, within a few weeks, have known better, because you know what happened. They had the terrible tragedy of the submarine going down straight to the floor. Whether there was an explosion inside or not, we don't know. But it was very interesting what happened. If ever there's a calamity in the West, the whole of the armed forces will go, they'll take everything there immediately. The politicians immediately will get together and say, what help do we want? They can have anything we can give. If we haven't got the help, we'll get it from someone else. There would be anxiety, because what mattered was not the submarine, but the lives of those in. And the interesting thing was that the new leader of the Soviet Union didn't act quickly. This was very soon the comment. He didn't try to mobilize everyone else. We didn't know whether we could help, but we were all ready to go and help, and sent some of the small submarines that we had just for such an occasion. But that, my friends, was very, very revealing indeed. They still do not value human life in the same way that we do. And so, all the help got there, I'm afraid, really rather late. And I'm very relieved in one way that Mr. Putin got so much criticism for what he should have done but didn't. And that again shows that the Soviet Union and the peoples of the Soviet Union are very much aware of what could be done, a great deal more could be done than is being done at the moment.
Ramar mato isu nai habu wabu matong butano matong itinggo. Sinamane biasa sinamane Rama mato abano Rama mato abano Aki ira buai Shinabi mai ani shinabi mai Ako shinabi mai Mato isho wanori Raibu yukata Raibu yukata No shinama diosa jinama Aton koshi oración Abuai Kano bibuai Kano bibuai
إذا لم يتحقق كل هذا أنا بعد ذلك سنعلن الزحف المقدس أيوة وأنا أراه معمر القذافي قائد أممي أنا يدافع عني الملايين أنا سنوجه نداء للملايين من الصحراء إلى الصحراء وسنبحث أنا والملايين لتطهير ليبيا شبر شبر بيت بيت دار دار زنقة زنقة فرد فرد حتى تطهر البلد من الدنس والنجاس.
Either this is the first Arab revolution of the 21st century or it will be brutally suppressed.
It was a time of both promise and fear. The Ben Ali regime in Tunisia had already fallen and Ben Ali had fled. In Egypt, the revolution seemed to have worked with Mubarak stepping down.
3 weeks of protests that have brought down a 30-year-old presidency.
All eyes were on Libya to find out whether the Libyan revolution would succeed.
Another Arab leader is facing the wrath of his people tonight, but Libya's Muammar Gaddafi is fighting back hard.
There was no way that the regime could maintain itself in the face of any uprising. And that is when Gaddafi saw the danger of his fall of grace, the fall of power.
February 22nd, 2011. In the Libyan capital, Tripoli, Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi prepares to deliver a speech, one that would make history. Just a week prior, small protests had erupted in Benghazi in the east of the country. Within days, state security forces had virtually lost control of the city, and in other towns across Libya, protesters were coming together and rising up. Gaddafi had a reputation for delivering political sermons. They were a regular fixture on Libyan state TV. This time, however, was different. This time, the world was watching.
دقت ساعة العمل، دقت ساعة الزحف، دقت ساعة الانتصار، لا رجوع، إلى الأمام، إلى الأمام، إلى الأمام، ثورة، ثورة.
When the speech was aired on the 22nd of February, I was at home in Tripoli, and everyone was waiting what Gaddafi would say. Gaddafi's speech was very hostile, was filled with violence, and was the crux point that led to many Libyans to take to the streets.
وسنزحف أنا والملايين لتطهير ليبيا شبر شبر، بيت بيت، دار دار، زنقة زنقة، فرد فرد، حتى تطهر البلد من الدلس والإرجاس.
So he spoke in colloquial Libyan. He was telling them, I'm speaking to you in your own language. I'm going to come to you every single home in every single street, and I'm going to get my revenge on you. I'm going to kill you.
بسرعة انقذوا نفسكم قبل لا نعطي إشارة الزعف المقدس. قد تندمون يوم لا ينفع الندم.
He thought he could stop it by igniting the fear again.
الماجورين من هؤلاء القطط والفيران التي تنقذ من شارع إلى شارع ومن زنقة إلى زنقة في الظلام.
Those words were chosen carefully by the people who wrote his speech. He described the protesters as rats, a word that could trigger some feelings among his supporters so that they can come to his rescue. He was feeling the heat on the streets.
Gaddafi had taken power in Libya 42 years earlier, overthrowing the country's king and branding himself a revolutionary leader. He'd risen to prominence speaking of Arab unity and Islamic socialism, but his rule would prove authoritarian and corrupt, with graphic displays of violence and bloodshed, often broadcast on the same state channel that aired his many speeches. Central to Gaddafi's rule was his cult of self, defined by his eccentric brand of showmanship. The Zenga Zenga speech was a textbook example. It was a moment that brought together rhetoric and spectacle, starting with the setting, a military compound in the heart of Tripoli, Bab al-Aziziyya.
Bab al-Aziziyya is his sanctuary. It is his safe haven and a symbol of resistance. The place is so eerie because parts of it have been subject to an airstrike by the US in 1986, and Gaddafi kept it the way it is as a symbol of how he resisted imperialism and colonialism. So for him, it was a very important setting because that place is filled with symbols. The statue, the fist crushing the American warplane. Every time they cut to the fist to show that, look, we resisted the Americans, so we can do anything to Libyans.
Bab al-Aziziyya, if you were to translate it into English, it means the door to glory. Glory to the Gaddafi regime from his perspective as a military stronghold that was at the heart of his power and his control of the country, but it was also marked the end of the Gaddafi regime. The fight kind of ended there, and so it was the door to the glory of the Libyan revolution as well.
Gaddafi's speech was followed by action. Libyan protesters came under attack from state forces. Air raids and mercenaries roaming the country left hundreds dead, and yet the pressure on Gaddafi didn't ease.
Gaddafi down today.
Opposition forces closed in on Tripoli.
Well, actually the real Gaddafi is hiding in Charlie Sheen's
Beyond Libya's borders, the speech went down as a piece of absurd political theatre. A remix of the Zenga Zenga line by an Israeli musician went viral. Late-night comedians in the United States discovered Gaddafi and his eccentric nature.
Muammar Gaddafi!
The speech set off geopolitical shockwaves that would ultimately lead to Gaddafi's undoing. Less than a month after he spoke, a UN resolution authorized military intervention in Libya. Forces from NATO and Middle Eastern countries descended, with airstrikes, a naval blockade, and the arming of rebel forces.
I don't think there was any planning in Washington or in Paris to remove him. I think they planned to remove him after that speech. It set up alarms in Washington and in Paris and Moscow for that matter too. I mean, if he had shut up, Benghazi would have been decimated by now and Gaddafi would be back in power. But this is the narcissism, this is the ego. The ego forces you to do things that ultimately are detrimental to you.
The Zenga Zenga speech was the first of two iconic media moments that marked the Libyan civil war of 2011. The second took place 8 months after Gaddafi gave the speech. They were his final moments. Images of rebel fighters dragging their former dictator through the streets were broadcast around the world. It was a grisly spectacle of a fallen tyrant, and much like the speech, it cast a shadow over the Libya that was to come.
What that speech represented, it represented the worst side, the dark side of authoritarianism. Libyans really did not have a choice. It was not their choice to have a very bloody and violent revolution. It put Libyans in a situation where there was just no going back. It will go down in history as a very important turning point in the Libyan revolution. It is for that generation to decide what kind of legacy is left behind and whether that speech is going to set the tone for the new Libya.
إذا لم يتحقق كل هذا أنا بعد ذلك سنعلن الزحف.
Ambassador Pavlovsky, welcome to 7:30.
Good day.
Ambassador, you're here in Australia enjoying the benefits of a free and open society. How do you live with yourself representing the repressive, dictatorial Putin regime? You find that funny?
I find what I find funny is your way to start an interview.
Pretty straight question.
Yes, too straight. So let me tell you first of all that I never had problems living in my country. I had lived there for 13 years after my previous appointment before I came to Australia. I never had an impression that I lived in an authoritarian, how did you put it?
Repressive and dictatorial
yes.
words I used. Perhaps I should just give you some more ideas of what I have in mind when I say that. This is a regime that invaded its neighbour. It's a regime where protests are suppressed, where your free media is muzzled, where dissenters are murdered or imprisoned, where the extent of your war casualties are hidden from the public. How would you describe this form of government, if not a dictatorship?
Sarah, actually, I don't think that we have to involve in discussing our form of government with you. Actually, I was preparing myself for substantial questions on Russia's policy and Russia's position on certain issues, Russia's role in the world.
Yes, and indeed those questions will come. I think for the audience it's important for them to understand who you are and who you are representing in Australia. But let's move on to the matter of Ukraine.
Please.
You were happy to dispense with diplomatic language when you accused Australians of being, quote, brainwashed into supporting Ukraine. Now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was a criminal action, and the Russian military has terrorized the people of Ukraine. Do you understand you don't have to be brainwashed to understand that?
What was indeed a criminal action, a brutal invasion of a sovereign country, an illegal and immoral aggression, was in fact what happened 20 years ago.
Who are part of this rising, this rebellion. What are you going to do about all of that?
What is the question?
The question is that there's a rebellion going on in this country. What can you, as leader of this country, do about it?
يعني ممكن أول مرة نقابل الصحافة هذه لي حقيقة تقدير لهذه المؤسسات.
Attention, United States. This Sarmat rocket was launched at Washington from Karabanovo town in Russia. The more I watch these videos, I realize there are a lot of retards in Russia.
إذا لم يتحقق كل هذا أنا بعد ذلك سنعلن الزحف. سنعلن الزحف المقدس. أيوة. وأنا أراه معمر القذافي قائد أممي. أنا أدافع عني الملايين. أنا سنوجه نداء للملايين من الصحراء إلى الصحراء. وسنبحث أنا والملايين لتطهير ليبيا شبر شبر. بيت بيت. دار دار. زنقة زنقة. فرد فرد. حتى تطهر البلد من الدنس والنجاس.
ارتاح لان انا كنت نتحدث مع الشباب في الساحه الخضراء وبنسرع معهم الليله، لكن هي جت مطربه الحمد لله فيها خيره. غير بنبين لهم اننا يعني في طرابلس ونعيش في فنزويلا. ما تصدقوا الاذاعات الكلاب هذه تظل. سلام عليكم.
يلي لا تتصدقونا في الظلام. من أنتم؟ أنا مقاتل مجاهد مناضل ثائر. من أنتم؟ نحن قاومنا جبروت أمريكا. من أنتم؟ تصفقون لإسكاتكم الأمريكان، يخدمون الشيطان. قد تندمون يوم لا ينفع الندم. أنتم تواجهون صخرة صماء، صخرة صلبة. دقت ساعة العمل، دقت ساعة الزحف، دقت ساعة الانتصار. إلى الأمام لا رجوع. لتطهير العالم شبر شبر، بيت بيت، دار دار، زنقة زنقة، فرد فرد. ثورة ثورة. دقت ساعة العمل. دقت ساعة الزحف. الملايين تضحك وما يقدر حد يوقفها. بسرعة بسرعة معي الملايين مش من الداخل، معي الملايين من الأوروبا. أنا نقدر نوجه نداء إلى كل ملايين الصحراء، من الصحراء للصحراء حتضحك الملايين. الملايين تضحك وما يقدر حد يوقفها. بسرعة بسرعة شبر شبر بيت بيت دار دار زنقة زنقة فرق فرق شبر شبر بيت بيت دار دار زنقة زنقة فرق فرق. دقت ساعة العمل، دقت ساعة الزعف، دقت ساعة الانتصار لا رجوع. دقت ساعة العمل، دقت ساعة الزعف، دقت ساعة الانتصار لا رجوع. دقت ساعة العمل، دقت ساعة الزعف، دقت ساعة الانتصار لا رجوع. شبر شبر بيت بيت دار دار زنقة زنقة فرق فرق شبر شبر بيت بيت دار دار زنقة زنقة فرق فرق. الأمان الأمان الثورة ثورة الأمان الأمان الثورة ثورة الأمان الأمان الثورة ثورة الأمان الأمان.
Ramar mato isu nai habu wabu matong butano matong itinggo. Sinamane biasa sinamane Rama mato abano Rama mato abano Arroyo nira mato yura akira Aki ira buai Shinabi mai ani shinabi mai Ako shinabi mai Mato iso wanuri Raibu yukata Raibu